relationship you have, if you really believe that one person is going to fulfill everything, every need,
Hmm.
it won't work.
Gorgeous.
Hi, Kevin.
Morgan,
Wow.
2 weeks away.
Really? It's been
Yeah.
two?
Well, 2 weeks since we've seen each other, right?
Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah.
You were only gone 1 week.
I was like, wait, did I get pulled into some weird time warp and I don't remember how long I was gone for? Because I haven't traveled in so long, it felt like a long time, which was really nice.
That's really interesting because I wrote about this in my blog, but
Uh,
I wrote about time very briefly
mm,
in that every time I write a blog or kind of sit down on Tuesdays to like do these check-ins or edit, I feel like time went by so fast. And when I sat down and wrote today, I'm like, I feel like it's been like 5 weeks. Like it's
mhm.
been so long. So it's just interesting to hear you say that time
Yes,
slowed down a bit for you too.
it did. It slowed down so much. It just felt like there were so many stages to the vacation, and that
Mhm.
I was like surprised it had only been like 2 days and then 3 days. And I'm like, dang, we're still here. We're still doing things. And it really gave a lot of clarity to how this year for everyone, what it's done to all of us, not being able to travel and not being able to get out there and do things and at a
Mhm.
normal pace, and what that has done to me specifically. There was so much, as I'm still processing through the trip because I just got back. There's so much inspiration that was just flowing through me when I finally relaxed and let myself enjoy.
Mhm.
And so many things I missed about traveling, uh, and just seeing a different part of the country. Like, I would have never gone to Asheville, North Carolina, or the Blue Ridge Mountains if it wasn't for this like specific event that I was invited
Mhm.
to, right? What was stressful did turn into something really beautiful and magical.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of gratitude for the whole experience and the acknowledgement that like
Yeah, I do
you
have
wouldn't
a
be
lot of
there.
gratitude.
Yeah.
I'm like writing it down. I'm like, I do have gratitude. That's what this is, right?
Yeah, that's really nice to hear. Like I
Yeah.
obviously haven't traveled or gone on any vacations in the same amount of time
Yeah.
that you've gone without it, but I did move across the country, and I guess that sort of counts as something. And I'm in a new
Hmm.
place, and sometimes I wake up and it does feel like I'm still on vacation,
Yeah.
but it's not quite the same as
I
your experience.
I actually feel every time I go to LA, even if it's for a long period of time, I feel like, because I do want to live in the West Coast eventually at some point in my life, because every day does kind of feel like a vacation. That's just, I think, our equilibrium aligning to the right part of that space, that environment for us.
Hmm.
That just means we're home to some extent. And
Yeah.
it's also how I feel here in Gloucester. It's like, when I remember when I first moved here, and maybe you can uh, relate to you moving to California, but like I just felt like every day I woke up and I'm like, it's a new day. It's what am I going to do today? Like, how am I going to play today? How am I going to have, what adventure am I going to learn from, to like, what am I going to do? And it felt like really refreshing, and I love it. It still feels that way, but I did lose that sense until I just left and came back.
That's the best part about vacations. It's like
Yeah.
you can get so much with so little, like such a short amount of time away, like a reawakening, a realization,
Mm,
a sense of gratitude. And realignment, like yeah, I don't know, insert all the words, but
All of the words. Ah,
yeah, it's like
peace.
a reset button for
It
sure.
really was. And I normally, I don't think I've ever really felt like it's a reset. I usually like when I go somewhere, I'm really tired when I come back and I have to like take a couple of days to like recharge to like get back into my
Hmm.
space. But I actually really felt like I came back recharged and ready to go and ready to start this new phase of my life and a better perspective and lots more clarity, lots more
Yeah.
self love. I know what I want to do. It just felt like for the first time, I went away and came back with this new sense of self.
Yeah, I'm curious
Mm.
to hear what you have to say about this, but a lot of times I would go on vacation, and when I would come back, I would actually feel depressed for a few
Yes.
days, like
Yes.
really depressed and
Me too.
kind of dreading whatever it is I would be going back to, whether it's like work or the quote unquote routine that whatever,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if that's just kind of the normal response, or
Mm.
when I really think about the vacations I went on, 95% of them were to California, and I wonder if maybe that was presented to me as a way of like my body telling me like this is where you belong, and then leaving the place felt really really hard.
Sad. Mm.
But you know, maybe I could be reading too much into it.
Yeah.
I
Maybe.
do I do know that I don't really relate to what you're saying about Massachusetts. And I think that means something too. Like, I really wanted to leave probably for the last 2 years that I was there. And I don't know, like, when I think about like Beverly and the North Shore, like, I think about it with a lot of love. I never had the feeling that I think that you're describing, which is so cool for you to know and acknowledge that you are feeling about Gloucester specifically. I
Yeah.
think it's like some people search their whole lives for that.
You're right. That's such a good thing to say and remind me of. And it only took a 20-minute drive difference from where I lived before to do that, which I don't know
Mhm.
what that says about me. But I do think Gloucester is really uniquely beautiful. I do think it has exceeds all expectations for landscape and being surrounded by beauty at every stage. That feeling that you get when you're like, I'm home, I feel really good here. And I felt that way. And then the pandemic happened. So had a lot of time to stay here and really take this place in for what it is, for the kind of nuances living in a cottage, kind of got a chance to know myself more in this wilderness kind of lifestyle.
Yeah.
I've also had to let go of a lot of my personal items. And I think there was,
Mhm.
along with this, like, oh, this feeling of I really like it here. Every day feels new, every day feels fresh, comes with also my connection and or my attachment to personal items and an old life that I used to have. I really switched things around. Um,
Yeah. You know what I noticed too, how we differ is like, I know that, well, I'm in Oakland, and I know that I don't want to be here.
yeah.
It's kind of an interesting feeling to be like sort of in the state that I want to be in,
Yeah, you're
but
so
not.
close.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, Kind of like a magnet, like the pull is stronger here than it
Yeah.
was in Massachusetts, I guess.
Yeah.
And so it's
Mm.
actually a similar feeling when I was in Beverly. Most of my time was spent like dreaming, manifesting, thinking about like where I'm going to be and all the parts that come along with like the exciting things, like what I'm going to see when I look out my window. And yeah,
Mm.
I'm a dreamer, and actually I feel the same way here.
Hmm.
So there's a sense of dissatisfaction about where I'm at and a longing about where I want to be. And the positive is that I love looking at houses on Zillow, and I love dreaming, and I love making lists of what I want and bookmarking things. And I imagine myself so clearly in a very specific environment, in a very specific place. And a lot of times when this has come up here and there, you don't respond the same way that I do. And I think it's kind of cool. Like, mostly what I get in response to me feeling like sort of dissatisfied with where I'm at, you respond with a lot of gratitude about where you're at. Like, I
Mm.
really love this place. I feel like I belong here. And that's kind of amazing.
Mm. You also are a trusting person. You trust that maybe you're not fully satisfied with this, but you'll have all these other reasons to love where you're at, regardless of this like slight dissatisfaction of maybe place or environment that you're in. But you do trust that everything is going to work out for you, right? Like you have this like I think positive outlook on, okay, well I might not be at where I want to be right now, but I'll keep like, making vision boards essentially is what you're doing to my future. And I know that
Mhm.
that's where I'm going to land at some point, which
Yeah.
I always find like really satisfying to hear because I struggle with the vision board situation. I struggle with envisioning a future because I just want to be satisfied with like where I'm at today and want to feel um I think contentment is really a big word. It was a big word for me in the past few years. Content in my body and myself and where I am. I also think it's interesting that you moved based on this feeling that you had. And so did I, right? Like I wanted to get out because of Beverly, because it was just time. It just felt like it was time to move on. I wanted my own place. I knew that. And I just kind of imagined this is the only time I did visioning, imagining. I said, something is going to work out for me. I am going to find my own thing where I don't have to pay, you know, security deposit. I'm not locked into a lease. These were the things that I was like manifesting. And I'm like, I'm going to call everyone I know, literally everyone I know. I called my old landlord and I was like, hey, do you have anything like, do you know anything like under the radar? Do you have anything like secret that I like maybe no one knows? And I called every single person I used to work with. And I mean, it really was the first time that I started making those calls in for myself and making those
Hmm.
decisions for myself. So I think that's why I love it so much is because yes, the vision came into place. There's this beautiful cottage that was cleaned up just in time for me to move in. Everything worked out perfectly. And I followed my heart in that decision and it was mine.
Yeah.
I didn't have anyone like, I wasn't working things out with anybody. I wasn't trying to like make decisions based on what their needs were and my needs were. It was solely my own. And I think that's why I honor it so much is because this is like the first time in my adult life that I really truly stuck it out for myself. Once I felt that feeling, I wanted to continue doing things like that, right? Like, what can I decide now? What bold move can I make for myself now that I have this freedom?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds really amazing and magical. Like, there's so much momentum around like making the calls and the
Yeah.
freedom that comes with being with yourself,
Yeah.
Like, I think that's
Well,
really cool.
I think like for you, you're like one step, you're like just always taking steps closer and closer and closer to like the things that you'd really want, but you're also making
Hmm.
the best of the situation at hand as well. Like you're not like so lacking that you're not uh,
Yeah.
grateful for what you have. It's not like that. I don't think.
Yeah.
I don't see
I
that.
will say, I really wanted to make sure I added that I've only been unhappy like truly unhappy in one place, and that was where I grew up in New Hampshire. Like as far back as I could remember being a child, like I wanted out so badly,
Oh
like
God.
clawing my way out. Like the second I could leave, I left, like with
Mhm.
no hesitation, to a place where I knew no one and
Mm.
a place I had never been, with such confidence. And I love Beverly. I love
Mm.
Massachusetts. I love being by the ocean. I could go on and on and on.
Ugh.
I made the best of it, and I met the most amazing people, people that I'll have in my life forever. Like there was no misery ever. Not even like with the sense of place. It was more just like this is an amazing place to be, an amazing place to
Mm.
stay, an amazing place to make memories, but it's not where I'm supposed to be permanently. And
Mm.
I felt that probably since I first visited California, it's just something that happens. I don't know how else to say it. Like I visited other places, I thought maybe I would move to Denver, and I visited and I was like, I don't feel
Mm.
the pull
Yeah.
here. And
Yeah.
I still say this to everybody. Denver has the best art in the world. Like I love Denver based artists so much. And it didn't disappoint when I visited. It was like this art is the best. And
Mm.
I was like, it's just not the place for me. So people might ask, well, then what is it? Like, I don't know. I don't really know. I just visited California and I kept going back over and over and over. And
Mhm.
I just felt like I need to be here. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I kept taking steps
Yeah. Well, and
and
listening to
mhm,
yourself, like,
yeah,
you know.
always being
Mm.
grateful, always being grateful for what I had. Like every time you and I would meet virtually, I'd be like sitting at the beach in Beverly, like
Mhm.
loving my environment.
Mhm.
And I love so many things about Oakland. And um, yeah, I just wanted to add that the only place I've ever been miserable was New Hampshire. I've never,
Okay.
I, yeah.
As everyone knows, Kevin and I both grew up in New Hampshire, the Granite State, where I grew up in the town where Mount Monadnock is, which is the most climbed mountain in the world. And we can fact check that if you want. And it's on there. It's on the internet.
Wow,
Um,
I didn't know that.
yeah, it's like
Coming in with the facts.
coming in with the facts. I mean, that's basically the
Wow.
only cool thing really about where I grew up. So I kind
Wow.
of have to say that. I did a lot of hiking in my childhood. Now, I'm similar to you where I really wanted to get out. I needed a change. I didn't like where I was. I wanted out of my family. I wanted out, it was just like really needed out of my environment. But the only thing that connected me to that place was the landscape. And I hiked all the time. And I got really into hiking. I got those like 5 finger Vibram shoes. Do you remember those?
Mm-hmm.
I had
So cool.
those. I got into like rock climbing at one point, like free climb,
Wow.
bouldering. Um, I was really active and and I loved it. It was the only thing I loved. I loved when it rained and everything was more green and that like fresh smell of rain in the woods. I mean, it came out in my art, especially when I moved to Beverly, but I was reminded of how much I loved it this past week when I was in North Carolina. And I was talking to Max about how I was feeling throughout the hike and how every single like moment really reminded me of home. And how when I came to Beverly for college, my life did drastically change. I stopped hiking. I stopped doing outdoorsy things. I
Why do you think
was,
that is?
well, the landscape changed. In Beverly, it's been about art and really implementing myself into the community and meeting all sorts of different people. And I had this culture around me that was so different from New Hampshire that's what fueled me and fed me. I wasn't seeking out adventure as much. Like while I was here, I was seeking out how to find myself.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, but then it removed me. So this is my reflection, is that it removed me from myself actually, because I wasn't in order to connect with yourself, it really is with nature, right? This is like
Yeah.
something that you're talking about as well these days, going back into nature and feeling your feet on the ground and having the earth hold you in a specific way. Whatever we get, what I was reminded of was myself and how much the landscape healed me. And it was the only thing that I had. And no wonder why I am so connected to landscape in this way. And then when I was hiking, I mean, we did this like, we stumbled upon this trail. It was so hard. I mean, it wasn't that hard, but it was moderate to hard, you know, and I was like, oh, it's all right. We'll do it, whatever. We hiked for 6 hours. Like, it
Wow.
was a steep mountain. And we were like, I didn't feel a thing but pure joy and bliss and freedom. And I was just like really reflecting back on how those things, I didn't have everything in New Hampshire didn't suck. Like that part didn't suck. The mountains didn't suck. My hiking didn't suck. You know, the
Hmm.
relationship that I had with the land didn't suck. And that's what, you know, speaks my work so much. So my question for you is like, there is absolutely nothing in New Hampshire that makes you miss it or long for it, or like not long for New Hampshire, but maybe long for a specific thing.
No.
Did you grow up in a mountainous place?
The closest hike was Mount Major, which
Oh,
is either in or near Alton, New Hampshire. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance. Um, it's
yeah.
just, yeah, it's just unfortunate. Like,
Yeah.
my dad was an alcoholic like my whole life. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of like my anxiety issues,
Hmm.
social anxiety issues, come from him if it is indeed genetic. Like he never left the house. He's still this
Oh,
way. Like he never went grocery shopping. My mom did it. He never
yeah.
even like going to the movies. He wouldn't go to the movies. He just stayed home and drank. So there was no nature. There was no hiking. There was no leaving the house. So I spent a lot of time at home, um, and I didn't get a chance. So I wonder what my perception of New Hampshire would have been like if things were different.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, like, as an adult, like moving to Beverly and then going back on my own terms, like Devin and I stayed in this amazing tiny house up in the White Mountains, and that was so cool. And I found a lot of joy and appreciation for the things that New Hampshire can offer as a visitor.
Kevin, you're like trying so hard. Same. You're like,
but
it's
but
okay for
I
you to hate the state and never want to go back.
and some of it just is like trauma. Like some of it is just like I really vividly remember like leaving to go to Beverly and then either going back to New Hampshire or getting close, like maybe I'm going up to Haverhill or Portsmouth or
Yeah,
something,
yeah, yeah.
and feeling close to the border and feeling depressed.
Mm,
So there's something I think
wow.
more connected to like
It's like a
trauma. And
visceral
yeah,
experience. Yeah.
unfortunately, like
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
think with nature, I wrote about this in my blog. Like when I grew up, like the house I lived in from the time I was born until 14 or 15 had half an acre of land. My mom now has like several acres.
Hmm.
Um, I spent as much time outside as I possibly could, and there's a lot of fun memories with my brother because that was like our escape. Like inside was bad, outside was good.
Yeah.
So we would do the stupidest things, like get like a plastic toy box and like put it on a snowy mountain. Of course, the toy box like broke because we were trying to use it as a sled, and like climb trees. And we'd come back and like our cheeks would have like bloody scabs because we would like try and sled through all these trees and we couldn't make it through them. And um, tons of memories catching snakes and stuff.
Stabby
Like I
cheeks.
I know, like literally, like I remember like both somehow I like smacked my face off so many trees on the way down the mountain, and we were
Love
like
that.
dying laughing.
Oh my
Yeah, a lot of like
God.
I told you I really wanted to be like the crocodile hunter. I would catch snakes. There's
Yes.
photos of me like holding up snakes like taller than I was. And so
Wow.
that was my positive memory about nature in my
Yeah.
backyard. That's what I had
Yeah.
access to.
Well, it's not dissimilar than my actual childhood. I'm like cutting up worms in my dad's like ice shed in my backyard. And I'm like, sledding down this huge hill that we lived across and hopefully didn't hit the horse that was at the end. Like,
What's worth noting, which might seem silly, but we have to have this on recording, is like we are the only generation that experienced everything. Meaning, when
yes.
we were born into a world with no technology,
Hmm.
and I don't even really know the exact details of your childhood, but I can safely assume that like since we were up in New Hampshire, it's like most of my childhood we didn't have internet.
Hmm.
There was no cell phones, even though they probably existed when we were like kids. My parents didn't have them, and it was just a different way. Like technology-lessness is
Yeah.
what like I grew up with. So we're the
Yeah.
only generation that experienced that, growing up with no technology, and then
Right.
we witnessed a slow kind of incorporation. Like we had
Yeah.
the big desktop computers that like maybe were in the living room or something that like everybody had access to, that only worked when someone wasn't on the phone.
Hmm.
um,
Yes.
and so when you talk about like, oh, this is what I did when we felt
Mhm.
bored, I feel
Yeah.
like it's important to note that that's like there was no like phone games, there was no
Mm.
computer games, there was no, at least for me, like I never even
Yeah.
had a phone. I didn't get a phone until I was like 20 something. um
Mm.
I when 18 I got an iPod touch, and I got like the free like text
Hmm.
message app that I could text when I was
Oh my
connected to
God. You in
Wi-Fi.
that text message app. You're like, I'm familiar with this app, actually. So this sense of like delayed technology, I think
Yeah,
that we can safely assume that
we're
you,
the only ones really
yeah.
that experienced it when we experienced it, like in
Yes.
the terms of like coming of age.
Well, in terms of what exactly of what we grew up with and now what it is now, like children
Hmm.
growing up with what they have, it was monumental when we got our computer. I mean,
Yeah,
I
how
remember
old were
every
you when, do you think?
um 10 or 11 or 12.
I think I was probably about there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I don't really know. Like maybe
I
9, maybe 10. I don't know.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's so interesting what we had done though to keep us kind of occupied before
Before
that
that. Yeah.
time. And yeah, I think a lot of what I experienced this past week kind of brought me back there, which is interesting.
Hmm.
And I think the word play was really like the biggest word that came out of this weekend or this week, because I was able to obviously eliminate my phone, eliminate any stress that I had about my life, and just truly sink into the relaxation of being away and connecting with the earth. And what that did was really bring me back to these like younger moments of play that I had and thinking about when that stopped. I mean, as a creative, as an artist, it really doesn't stop for us. We're always, even in school, we're continuously like playing, learning, taking risks, because that's the only way we learn. I was alone a lot and you were too. So we had to like keep ourselves occupied somehow. And nature was really the only thing that we had. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's interesting to like make those parallels now with that play, the playfulness, and how it's so easy to stop playing, even when you are an artist.
It's interesting too, like you're talking about kind of questioning or wondering about what changed. And what I'm hearing a lot about is like people and place. And, you know, meaning like
Yeah.
sometimes the people you're with bring out that play, and then
Yeah.
sometimes the places you're visiting bring out that play. But what
Right.
happens like
Mm.
when those people aren't there and you're not in that place? Like, how do you facilitate that play always, or as much as you possibly can? Like, that's an interesting thing to ponder. I did want to add that
Mm.
I'm experiencing a lot of that play that you're talking about because my brother recently moved here.
Mm.
And just hearing me talk about, in response to your experience, that like cutting up worms in your backyard, like a lot of my memories of play outside were with my brother, and now he's
Yeah.
back in my life. And
Ah,
in last week's blog, I wrote about that, how my brother and I both took sketchbooks up a mountain and we sat and drew together and talked and laughed. And there's a different kind of humor that happens, a different kind of play that happens with my brother that I don't think can happen with anyone other than him, because we have this shared experience of
yeah.
childhood. I'm experiencing play in a whole new way, almost like you just described, as like a revisiting of something old and familiar.
Yes, a revisiting. I really like that word, writing it down. I just want to note that I love this relationship that you have with your brother. And I'm a little bit envious of it only because my sister and I did have moments like this, but something about my family, we just never were close. And being close felt awkward, even at a young age. Like
Did
it,
you want that?
no, I wanted connection. I wanted to be with other people doing other things, like maybe not other people, but my family. I always wanted a closeness with them that
Mm-hmm.
was obviously wasn't there. And then when I always knew when bad things were happening. So then I just found a distaste for finding closeness in them. Um, but it's really started at a young age. But, my sister and I have obviously good little memories like the ones that you speak of with your brother, but we were so different, and she didn't really want to be outside a lot. She didn't really want to do anything I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
She was like a rebel in that way, and she was only 4 years younger than me, but you and your brother are 6 years apart. So it makes me a little jealous that like you could have that. I always thought, no, maybe it's because we're 4 years apart.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's because of the distance or like in our age. And I always thought if I ever have kids, like I'm never going to do that to them. Like I'm going to have one after the other and like make sure that they're like close in age. But you're
Yeah.
really like bringing to light that it really doesn't matter about the age. And I just really wanted to say that's really sweet that you and your brother like are this close and that you get to rediscover these moments of play now in your adult life, which is just going to make everything so much more fun. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think everything is temporary. I think my sister and I will eventually get there, right? That we'll maybe in sometime in our life live closer together. So we're able to rediscover certain things. But
Well, it's interesting you talk about like how people play differently,
yes,
and how do you play with people? It sounds so funny to say.
I know. How do
With
you play?
how do you play with people who have different interests? And a lot of what you were just describing about my brother and I kind of sounded similar to you and Max. Like, we are just so in
Yes.
sync, like we play the same way and like we have similar goals. And it's like when I was thinking we would enter this conversation with a focus on our partners. And I'm like, that's a little tricky because
Mm.
the same way that you talked about your sister, like we just had different interests. Like Devin and I have a lot of different interests, and actually a lot of times we don't fulfill each other's needs. Like he's not a super outdoorsy guy,
Mm.
and I'm not a super social outgoing person, and he loves to be
Yeah,
like
he's
out at like
so
different
out. Yeah.
bars and
Yeah.
different,
Yeah.
like maybe even a club, maybe like a show, around people, and that's not my thing. So there's like a butting heads sort of about like how do we play separately. And
Right.
then how do we play together? And two and a
Mhm.
half years in, I think we're pretty close to like perfecting it. And the one thing, the big thing I wanted
Still
to
working
mention
on
it is like one person can't be everything to you. And I think that's when resentment builds, not even just with a partner, but just any relationship you have. If you really believe that one person is going to fulfill everything, every need,
it. Mhm.
it won't work. And
Yes.
I've learned more about myself with Devin than any other
Mhm.
partner. And it's because we're so different. I'm constantly challenged, like,
Mhm.
okay, like I'm actually, this is kind of frustrating. Like, what do I do with that frustration? How do we talk about it openly and honestly
Mhm.
so that we both are getting what we want, we feel heard, and I could go on and on and on. And it is okay to play differently as long
Yeah.
as you find time to play together. And
Sure.
that's what Devin and I like. We don't check all the boxes for each other in that particular, on the subject of play.
Mm.
But like I have my brother who's going to go on a hike with me. I have these other like, you know,
Relationships that
other
fulfill.
relationships.
Yeah.
And there's something that happens with you and I that doesn't happen with Devin and I, that doesn't happen with my brother and I, that doesn't happen with Taylor. Like every
Totally.
relationship I realize like holds a different thing. And mainly it's like in importance in my life. Like you're really
Mm.
important to me.
Mhm.
Devin's really important to me. And it's like you don't all do the same thing. You don't all say the same thing and you don't all play the
Mm.
same way
Right.
on the
Ah,
subject.
but it's, oh my God, I love what you're saying. Everything that you're saying right now, I'm just like beaming at, because this is such a learned experience. This isn't something that like we just know. We are oftentimes trying to find in a partner what we're lacking in ourselves. And we are grasping at trying to have this person fulfill every part of us. And I love that you're talking about how you and Devin have similar ways of play. And it's really putting things in perspective for me in terms of like my past relationships and how I used to really get so hurt that like so and so didn't want to go on a hike with me, or didn't like camping, and didn't like the outdoors, didn't like bugs, didn't like wet grass, and like and I'm like, come on, like this is my adventure. That's like what I love to do. How are we so different, but yet how are we so in love? And it would constantly challenge me. And it
Yeah.
was that relationship that helped me learn about those components of they can't be everything. And I started learning it through Esther Perel
Hmm.
specifically, and John Gottman specifically, about
Yeah.
yeah, finding your own sense of play and having people in your life that fulfill different things. And the difference between my relationship now is that we do have similar ways of play and we get along so well. Like we're just, I was so amazed at how we traveled together. It was like we're just really similar in the way we move through the world and the way we see things and the way that we like operate. So that for me is like a really something I've never had. I'll give an example. Like I brought my sketchbook out to a restaurant that we went to, and I'm like, I'm going to draw your profile. And he's like, and then you can draw mine. And he's like, no, I'll go first. And he doesn't draw, right? He has no skills. And but he's so willing and so open to the idea of just like grabbing my sketchbook and drawing my profile. And it was the scariest profile I've ever seen anyone draw. But I loved it so much because it was just this willingness to play and go along with it without any insecurity. And that was just so endearing to me. Before you say anything, I did want to ask you something, because you said that you and Devin are almost at a place of perfecting your relationship to play with one another. And
Hmm.
I want to A, ask about that word perfection, and B, ask you to maybe expand on what
Yeah.
that is, if you feel
Yeah.
comfortable doing so.
Definitely, because it's something that was a real struggle for a long time. Most of the times where we would fight or butt heads or even reach a point where we question being with one another, it was because we looked at each other and we're like, we are just so different. And I just wanted to say along those lines that like I think we are taught like growing up that we should date almost like a clone of ourselves or like someone that kind of compliments you and it's just like perfect and you like all the same things. And being with Devin made me realize that I actually don't want that.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm.
I want to experience life with someone who makes me see things in a way that I would never imagine
Mhm.
and think about things in a way that I would never imagine. Like it
Yeah.
happens daily where he'll say something like, I just would never think about it like that.
Yeah.
And it opens my mind. And I think about a life with someone who's like a clone of me and kind of agrees and nods at everything. And I think about all the missed opportunities for growth and learning and overcoming obstacles and challenges. And that's probably the overarching theme of our relationship is like really overcoming discomfort
Mhm.
and challenges and centered around play. It's like there was a lot of real conver- conversations about meeting each other's needs and and discomfort. I think with ourselves like, oh, I love this person so much, why can't I do what they want? And then also in the reverse, like why can't they do what I like?
Right. Like,
And
yeah, like at what point do you start to get insecure because you want to fulfill their needs so that they
yes,
don't leave you,
yeah, exactly, yeah,
essentially?
yeah, that's come up a lot too. And it's like again a realization that like we can't be everything to each other. There's an element of compromise too, of like, yeah, like Devin will go on hikes that are a bit shorter, and I'll go out for like a certain amount of time. And in order to like coexist and explore play in a way that it's all mutually enjoyable, more conversations need to be had. And with more communication, it'll lead you to a place of more connection. Like we feel so
Yes.
connected because we know without a shadow of a doubt that we're meeting each other's needs, we're making our partner happy, and we're experiencing pleasure and happiness on our own.
Right.
And that's really cool. So none of those things would have happened through the years of experiencing challenges and obstacles
Mm-hmm.
without a lot of communication, without facing the discomfort head on, trying to process it on our own, and then together having open communication. So when I use the word perfection, it's only to describe the experience of like, I think we're getting closer to not even really experiencing discomfort or displeasure or dissatisfaction with the relationship in regards to play because we're kind of in a rhythm where it's like certain things are just okay,
Mm-hmm.
like focusing on solutions versus dwelling in the negativity of wanting more. It's like you can actually have more if you lean
Yeah.
into like I said, communication
Stay open.
and openness. And
Yeah.
I don't know, I've really discovered life has become the world has felt like a bigger place with more opportunities with Devin because we are not similar. It's the way I will
Yeah.
tie it all
Yeah.
up.
I wrote down the phrase productive understanding when you were describing. That's just the what phrase popped into my head. Like, it is the process in which you're describing of getting to know somebody. And
Mhm.
you know that with your friends, you're not similar. We have different interests than our friends. We have different, and you're essentially doing the same thing, but you have this like romance that's underlying the entire thing.
Yeah.
Which at first is what you're focused on, right? You're focused on the romance, you're focused on how much you love each other and how much compassion and how much, yeah, maybe more of the physical world of that romance. And then once you and Devin have been together for how long?
Like 2.5 years.
2.5 years, a long time, right? And you've gone through a move and I mean, I think it's a long time. I think it's a long enough where you're starting to have these conversations about your differences and how they can actually work with each other instead of against each other. And I really like this conversation.
Yeah, well said. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly it. Like, how do we use our differences to work with
Yeah.
one another? Like, we add so much to each other's lives. Like, he
Yeah.
tells me pretty much daily, and I tell him daily. Like, he's just like, you bring so much peace and calm in my life, because Devin's like a ball of energy, and
Mhm.
we'll just be like holding one thing and doing another thing and trying to do dish like uh and I'm like the opposite, like laser focus, and
Yeah.
there's magic in both, and there's magic in the in between. So
Hmm.
um yeah, it's almost like a daily acknowledgement that there's this like
This,
verbal, like
yeah.
we verbally tell each other, like this acknowledgement that we appreciate each other and
Yeah.
appreciate the differences.
Yeah. Ugh, it's so loving because you have to have a tenderness around the differences. You have to have this like loving aura around those differences, or else resentment and anger starts
Yeah.
to be involved. And that is, and not to say that resentment and anger hasn't been around, right? Like those are things that come in any relationship. But I think that what you are is an extreme communicator. And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I think having that skill is going to make sure that you have these like successful relationships. And it's a really, again, something that you've taught yourself and maybe something that you've really researched. I mean, in your research with love, I no doubt think that has helped your relationships,
Yeah.
right? Of
Yeah, it
course.
has. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I think, I have my own research on love without even knowing I'm really researching love. I'm very much
Hmm.
interested in the subject and
Yeah.
connection with other people and all of this.
What I hear a lot with when you talk about your relationship is that you encourage a lot of growth. Um,
Yes. Yes. So,
and a lot of it is around like learning and reading. Like last night we were reading this thing and we shared
mm,
it together. Like those are really, that's an amazing quality to have in a relationship, that like
yeah.
growth is going to happen no matter what.
Right. Like, I think you really hit it the nail on the head, or whatever that expression is with us. And I think like we met each other for a purpose of like reminding each other that our individual selves are like the main priority, just truly help each other be the best versions of ourselves. And it's like so much fun. It's almost like you have this
Hmm.
like cheerleader as well next to you.
Yeah.
And it's loving, and it's not like I want you to be a certain way. It's like I want you to be what you want to be. And what I'm hearing is that you want to improve in these things. So let me help you. I'll help you get there. And
Yeah.
how can we align ourselves in a similar way? And
I think
yeah.
that's so important. And
Yeah.
it's actually something coincidentally I've been thinking a lot about,
Mm,
um, just because Devin and I are experiencing another big challenge. And
yeah.
um, something you said really reminded me of, I'm going to share this podcast with you because I thought it was really good.
Mm,
I listened to two interviews and I wrote down, love people in a way that supports their freedom.
yes.
And then underneath, I wrote, real love supports freedom. So it's
Mm,
like when you really love someone, you want them to do, like, to be really specific. Like, I want Devin to go out and go to a club and go to a
yes.
bar.
Yes.
And I don't want him to go on a 5 mile hike when I know that he doesn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's That's real love. Like one that supports freedom, that's not
Yeah.
controlling. And that's what I'm hearing you say a lot about the relationship you're in. And
Mhm.
that's worth noting, I think.
Yeah, it's totally worth noting. Yeah, thanks. I'm enjoying this reflection. And I know I haven't been in this relationship for a long time, but I was alone for a good period of time before this relationship, in which allowed me to learn a lot of the things that you're speaking to, of the things that you're learning with Devin. It was almost like I was learning my wants and needs and goals into a relationship, but also like learning my own cycles and learning what I tend to gravitate towards in terms of need and want and longing, and where do all of those things come from, and how not to desire that into a relationship. So like when I was reintroduced with Max, it was like I had zero expectations. It was like I wasn't like looking for something. I wasn't like looking for this person. It was like we met, we were like oddly similar and so drawn to each other. And we were like, what is going on? And
There's no right way. Like, love and relationships are so complex. And it's like,
yeah,
I think the biggest thing about all of it is that I've repeated it so many times, but it's worth repeating, is that one person
yeah,
can't be everything.
yes,
So maybe your partner is really similar to you, but maybe your 5 close friends are really different. I think that what would be devastating to your or anyone's mission of personal growth and learning about yourself
mhm,
is to put everything into one person and isolate
mhm,
yourself. It's like and it seems silly to even say that out loud, but I thought that was the way. Like, you find your person and then that's it. But as I've gotten older, it's like I actually need people, like plural.
mhm,
And
yes,
everybody kind of does a certain thing and fulfills a certain thing. And I hope I facilitate that for them and that
mhm,
it's mutual. But it's like, it really, when I hear that you guys are really similar, I don't blink an eye. Like, it's like, I've dated people really similar to me, like, and there was beauty in that. Like, even
mhm,
to the same point you made, like,
yeah,
strangers would stop us. Like, I remember we were camping and they were like, "Oh, are you guys brothers?" And we're just like,
yeah,
I remember we were like, "Yeah, we're brothers."
yeah, totally.
Like, we looked alike and we were so similar. And
Yeah.
but it's like, as if there was a way to be in a relationship, like you
There's
have to find someone. Like, it's not like that.
No, like there is someone for everyone, and there
Yeah,
is specific love for specific people. And
yeah,
what Max and I share is definitely something I've never had an experience before. And there are a lot of similarities, and we actually take great comfort in that. And
yeah.
it's like we're being seen for the first time. And
Hmm.
that is something really, really beautiful, and something in which we all want in our life, is to be seen and heard and noticed.
The one thing I want to make sure I say too is
Yeah.
something about communication, and I think
Yes,
that's like the key to all of this is
it is.
communicating how you feel, whether you're really similar to your partner, or really different, or somewhere in between, like, or even with your friends. Like, that's something that I have practiced for a bit now, and it's only brought like more love, more positivity. Like, the second I got on this call with Morgan off camera, I was like, I just really want to say that I really missed you and I really like love and appreciate you. Like, I always communicate how I feel
Yes.
and am honest with how I feel with everybody,
Yeah.
friends, family, my partner.
It is.
And I think the more we can do that, uh, the better our relationships will be.
Absolutely. Like, let's start this global movement now. Let's
Yeah.
start like expressing our compassion and feelings to other people all the time. It's really refreshing when you're able to communicate things to me. I almost get, it's funny. It's like I completely like receive it within the same amount of gratitude in which you are telling me how grateful you are for me, and I receive it with that amount. And I think that other people have a harder time receiving certain communication. I think some people would get like shy or embarrassed, like, oh really, oh thanks. And
why do you think that is?
I was just thinking about communicating my feelings to like my neighbor or something, and
Mm-hmm.
thinking about what her reaction would be. That's why.
Well, I'll answer my own question.
Okay.
I think I wonder if people kind of shy away or are uncomfortable with that kind of thing because we don't do it.
Well, and
Like,
you know what it is? Vulnerability.
yeah. And I think that yeah, exactly. Like we really don't do it enough, and it is a vulnerable. There's almost like this. I think sometimes people might feel like an expectation to respond, period. Actually, like,
Yeah.
when I said what I said to you, I didn't expect anything in return. It was just purely like, I just want to tell you
I
how
need to
I
get this off
feel.
no, you were more like, I need to get this off my chest. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. You're like, I just need to say something before I'm like, oh no, he's gonna like say something bad, or he wants to change. You're like, I just need to get this out. You're like, you couldn't even continue without telling me how you felt.
It was so like on my mind for multiple days.
Oh, it's so
um,
sweet.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it is like a vulnerable thing and a tricky thing to navigate for people who get a bit uncomfortable with it.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I don't think it should stop us from doing it. I think if that's how we feel, then we should do what we feel and not get so wrapped up in the worry about the reaction. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
speaking from the experiences I just had over the week of saying no, right? That we're talking about setting boundaries and saying no, and the kind of the backlash that you get from being honest. It's
Mm-hmm.
really isn't it the same thing, being honest about a positive thing? I think it's coming from the same place. Fear and love, they're all connected. Everything is the
Yeah,
same.
because both are about saying how you feel
And being
regardless
vulnerable.
of regardless of
Hmm.
what might happen, and
Yeah.
sometimes that's tough.
Yeah.
I honestly have never, once I started doing this more, I think there's strength in like repetition, but I never experienced any hesitation. I do it like all the time. Actually, today, it's funny you mentioned the neighbor thing,
Mm,
because one of my neighbors, she's like the person who kind of tends to the garden, and the other day she was like reorganizing the whole laundry room, and I sent her a message. I was like, I just want to thank you for all you do, like you are just like so wonderful. And she was like, oh my god, no problem. The big thing I want to say again is like, I say that to my neighbor with no expectation, and I
yeah.
say what I said to you without needing or wanting or expecting a compliment in return, or
Sure.
it's just how I feel. And I want to relay like an appreciation, gratitude,
Hmm.
love, respect, so on.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's just how I am. And if
That's so cute. I don't like using that word, but it's like a cute in a way where it's like, it feels like it's an effortless thing for you. It feels like it's just part of your wiring. And there's absolutely no world in which you will live that you will be held back from letting people know how you feel. And that is really it's like my favorite quality about you because it's refreshing, and it also reminds me to be vulnerable. It reminds me to say, hey, I need to like set some time aside to make a gratitude list, and like just you saying that you appreciate me and that you missed me this week, I immediately was like, how can I improve my own gratitude in my life? I mean, it was like immediately I was like, wow, like I am probably thankful for so many things that I'm not good at like continuing making those lists. And I think it was really interesting that when I was away, I was able to have this, I had more gratitude because I wasn't kind of flooded with any fog of my regular life. Your reminder of just saying how you feel is like reminding me to take a step back from my day every day and be thankful. Yeah. So thanks.
I love that.
Thanks for being you.
I wrote down radical honesty.
Ooh, radical honesty. I'm gonna
Like,
write
I'm
that down
just gonna,
too.
gonna be so honest all the time.
Is I love talking about gratitude and love,
Me too.
and I love where this conversation went today.
Yeah, this was one that maybe it's just gonna keep getting better and better, though
Yeah, yeah,
I don't wanna set that expectation and be
yeah.
disappointed, but
Mm.
this was like second recording in a row where I just kind of forgot we were recording.
Yeah, exactly.
I
Me
was just
too.
like so into what I was saying, and that might be good and bad. I don't know. I might have like rambled too long
Who
because I was like
knows?
too excited.
I actually think we both rambled quite a bit, but it was all really good rambling, effective and productive. Until next week.
Until next week, thank you all for listening.
Thank you.